Welcome to Conversations in Black, African American History and Heritage, Greensboro, North Carolina. Here, folks tell their story from their perspective, dealing with genealogy, childhood, neighborhood, segregation, parenting, and stories about life in Greensboro.
History happens to you. You know what I mean? I guess we're all history, in some form. It's just a matter of kind of realizing who you are and how you fit in to this tapestry called America.
I am Jo Evans Lynn. I taught in over 37 years in the Alamance County schools, Guilford County schools, but I started teaching in Charlotte Courthouse, Virginia. I'm reading specialist and English and drama and speech and debate teacher. I was born in 1948 at L. Richardson Hospital.
Who delivered you?
Dr. Evans.
Dr. George Evans?
Yes.
And tell me who your parents were.
My parents are Joseph and Mary Evans. Both my parents are from South Carolina. My dad was from York, South Carolina, and my mother from Springfield, Sally, the chittering capital of the world. I can remember, the first thing I can really remember from my childhood was when my mother worked. We stayed with my Aunt Daisy, and we slept, my sister Gloria and I slept in, really it was a hallway in a shotgun house, and there were people going back and forth all evening long. But I can remember being in that hallway while she was babysitting with us, and I can remember we went to the doctor. It was even though every aspect of our community was segregated back then. Since my mother worked for Mr. Ben Wilson at the time, and she took his children to the doctor for their checkups and everything. She also took us to the same doctor. And I did not know until years later that there was a colored entrance for our doctor's office, because we always went in the white entrance because they knew my mother, because she always was the children that she took care of. Through there, and so she took her own children there, and Dr. Wilson examined us and took care of us just like he did the other children. He eventually left North Carolina to be on that ship, Hope, that travels around the world to take care of people. He was a magnificent person.
Tell me your Aunt Daisy's last name.
She was married to Willie Evans, and her last name was Evans.
Okay.
And he was a distant cousin of my father. Matter of fact, my father came to Greensboro after he got out of the Army after World War II, and that's how he met my mother. Her mother had died when she was 10 years old, and when she was 14, they found out she had a heart murmur or something, and so they allowed her to come to Greensboro to live with her Aunt Daisy. And so she always teased my dad about the fact that she was better educated than he was, because the schools in York, South Carolina for colored people only went to the 6th grade. And that's as far as she had gotten, was to the 6th grade. But in Greensboro, North Carolina, Lincoln had already been built at that time. And so black people in Greensboro went all the way up to the 9th grade, and you could go on to Dudley High School. My mother didn't go to high school because my aunt said by that age you're too old to be not somewhere working. So that's why my mama didn't go to high school. She finished it with 9th grade.
And she took care of Dr. Wilson's children?
No,
Is that what you were
not
saying?
Dr. Wilson, Mr. Ben Wilson.
Mr.
He was, his mother and father were co-owners of Black Cadillac. But he did, I think he was like a traveling salesman or something. And he lived right across from Aycock School. My dad really didn't want my mom to work. He was really old-fashioned, you know, I'm the man of the house, I paid the bills, and he did. Mama never paid a major bill until after my dad died in 1980. But she just wanted to have her own little piece of money to do some things, because he did what was necessary, but she wanted to do what she wanted and to have what she wanted to have. And you know, sometimes, you know, when men are meeting your necessities, they don't think all the things that you want are necessary, but she did. And so she just went, and somebody told her, one of her friends told her that a lot of people in the Aycock community had day workers. And she started at one end of the street, and she was 17 at the time, at one end of the street, and she would go and stop at each house and ask them if they needed help. And finally, the lady that answered the door at Mr. Ben's house was so rude to her, and told them they don't need any help, they've got me, that she sat on the porch, and when Mr. Wilson walked up, he said, do you know that you have someone in your house that's rude to people and talking ugly to people when they come to see you, see people at your house? And he said, are you talking about my wife or Eunice? And she said, I don't know, who was it? Are you married to a colored lady? He said, no, ma'am, I'm not. He said, no, I'm not. And he said, well, why were you knocking on my door? He said, I'm looking for work. And he said, well, I have somebody right now, but my mother can't keep a girl working for her. I will recommend you to my mother. She lives a few ways down the road. If you promise me that you will stay with her for at least a year and won't quit. Mama said, I can do that. And so that's how she started. She first started with what she always called her Old Lady Wilson. And then Eunice died about a year or so later, and she started working full-time for Mr. Ben Wilson. My father always worked at least 2 jobs. He worked for years, he worked at Dick's Columbia Laundry when it was way out on Battleground Road, and he refused to ride the city bus when it was segregated. He walked everywhere until he got a car. And then by then he was working at Curtis Meat Packing, which was not that far from my house, but I can't ever remember him driving the car to work. He always walked. And he basically did that. He said, I'm not going to pay my 10 cents to sit in the back of a bus. My parents were like that. You know, there was something about them that even though things were segregated and they were accepting of some things that they could not change, but they were also people who made a difference, you know, when they could and where they could. My mom did the first I've ever heard, and I haven't heard anyone else doing it since then, lay-in. Well, back in the 50s, a woman could not have her tubes tied to prevent a pregnancy unless her husband signed for it. And so when my mother was pregnant with my brother being the youngest of us, she started having, her feet was swelled so bad she couldn't even tie her shoes, and she had to slit her shoes on both sides. Her feet would be so swollen. At the end of the day, Gloria and I would massage her feet when she came home, and she was just not feeling well at all. And you know, they have names for it now, but they didn't back then. But she decided that he was going to be her last child. She was not going to have any more children. But Daddy wouldn't sign the paper. He was like, you know, a lot of people are now, that, you know, you're going to have every child God will give you. And it seemed, Mom, because her mother had died in childbirth when she was 10 years old, having my Aunt Margaret. And Mama said, I didn't want my children to grow up like my brothers and I grew up, because all of us, no relative could take in all 6 of them. So one went here, Luke went there, Mother stayed with her dad for a while, and then to Aunt Daisy, and Margaret went to Grandma Hester, and they were all around everywhere, but they were never a family again. And she says, I don't want that to happen to my children. And so when she went to the hospital, before she went to the hospital, she told my sister Gloria and I, we were the 2 oldest of the children, that don't help your daddy with anything. By that time, Gloria was 9 and I was 7, that we could clean up, we could do some through the week cooking. You know, we cooked most of the meals during the week. And Dad always fried fish on Saturday, and Mom cooked Sunday's dinner and everything. But we did most of the through the week cooking. And she said, don't do anything to help your dad while I'm gone. And so when she went in the hospital, she asked him if he would sign the paper, and he wouldn't. So she stayed in the hospital for 17 days. After she did a lay-in, she just would not leave the hospital till he signed the paper. Well, my dad was a pretty good cook, so he thought, well, I can make it without, you know, she can stay up there till he's 20-something years old if she wants to. And he came up with a plan that he was going to get us dressed the night before, because Gloria, Mary, and Sandra and I were in school. And he was going to get us dressed for school the night before. And he did, but he made a mistake because some of the children peed the bed. And so he was late going to work, and he was never late going to work because he had to change clothes and all that to get us off. And then the teacher sent him a note because he didn't know how to iron and get the school clothes ready, because back then you had to wear dresses to school and skirts, and nobody wore pants and stuff to school. But he was sending us to school in our play clothes. And so he got a nasty letter from the teachers at Washington Street School telling him that, you know, he was going to be reported to the child care, health care, whatever department they had. If he didn't, kept sending us to school with pants on and play clothes on instead of our dresses and things. And he said, well, they need to come here and iron those pettifords, because we had pettifords and all that kind of stuff. And so finally he gave up and signed the paper, and she came home.
And she was at L. Richardson Hospital?
All of us were born at L. Richardson Hospital.
What year was this?
55.
And you said she started that among others in the community?
Well, what she started was that up until that point, the ladies, we had the smallest family in our block of houses, and there were like the Haygoods had 14, the Moorheads had 12. I mean, they were 10, 12, 11, 12, 14. I think the biggest one families had, can't remember the name, but there were about 16 of them. There were huge families. And see what would happen, like if a mother died in childbirth, a father would marry, and bring her home to take care of her children, the children, and then he'd have both 5 or 6 or 7 more by her. I had a friend, Hank Wall. His dad fathered something like 22 children by 3 different wives. So,
well, did her lay-in get out into the community?
It did. It encouraged some of the other women not to just do lay-ins, but to get tubes tied. To say, okay, I'm not going to risk dying in childbirth. I'm going to have my tubes tied. So a lot of the men were upset with Dad because you can't control your house and you messing everybody else up. And Dad said, well, you go in and tell her what to do if you want to. And Mama said, I wish somebody would come in here and try to tell me what to do with my body and see what happened to them. And they better not come while I'm in the kitchen. Because she said, it won't be my fault what happens to her. As far as women's rights, and I look at what's going on now with abortion, people don't remember it, but back then abortions were illegal. But there was always someone in the community who took care of women. And we were very fortunate in our community, the woman who took care of women that way, Miss Mayella, was a nurse, had been a nurse before she came down to go to school down here. And but that was not the first choice of most of the women, was to get an abortion, because in a lot of places it was if you chose to have an abortion, it meant that you wouldn't have any more children because it might puncture your womb or do damage or something to you, or cause you to have infection if they weren't clean with it or whatever. And so that was not a choice for poor women. So they had 12, 13, 14 children. It wasn't a choice, but it was available if you wanted. It wasn't legal. But I didn't find out, but when I heard somebody talking about some movie star dying, and she had committed suicide or something, and they said that she was depressed and despondent because she'd had several abortions, and the husband that she was married to now, she really wanted to have children by him, and she found out that she could not have children, and so she was despondent, and that's why she committed suicide. And I said, well, that's one of those make-up stories, because abortions were illegal all that time that they're talking about. And my friend said, white women could always get abortions. They could go to another a place where they could get it, or he said, have you ever heard of a white girl disappearing for a few months? They might go out of town and have a baby. They would say that she had it, but a lot of times she had an abortion. And I said, well, how did they do that? And she said, well, they had somebody to take care of them, but unlike in black communities where it had to be somebody who was doing it illegal, they had doctors and people who would do it for them. So that's what they're sending us back to. No matter how much politicians say that it's just like prohibition. Prohibition never stopped anybody from drinking. And just like saying no abortions will stop people from having an abortion, people will always find a way, desperate women will find a way to do it. It's just that you're making them doing it in ways that will endanger their lives. You know, back then, my mom and the ladies who worked in people's homes, they called one another by their last name as a point of respect, because it used to make me so mad. The children that my mother took care of called my mom May Helen. And I just thought it was so wrong for children to call my mom by her first name. My mom wouldn't even let me, when I was in college, my best friend called her mother by her first name. And I said, well, Mom, my friend calls her mother by her first name. I think I'll start calling you Mary Helen. And she said, I don't think so. She said, I tell you what, you can start calling me Mary Helen when you get to be the same age that I am. I said, well, my mama can be the same age as you. She said, because I'll be dead. That's the only way you going to catch up with me is I'll be dead. And then you can call me by my first name if you want to. But there's no guarantee I won't come back and haunt you.
Is your mom still living?
No, she died in 2007, March 1st, 2007.
Sorry.
She had a massive heart attack. But Gloria and I were really happy. My older sister Gloria and I were really happy that 4 years before she died, we were able to retire her completely so that she could do some of the things she wanted to do, and we would make sure that she could get and do anything she wanted to do and travel anywhere she wanted to travel. But she always went to the church conferences, and we celebrated when she went to the church conferences because that meant Dad was in charge. And when Dad was in charge, those were some good times. I only got one whipping while Dad was in charge. And it wasn't even my fault, it was my stupid sisters and brothers' fault.
You still remember that?
Yeah, I could beat them up right now, because that's the only whipping I ever got from my dad. The lady that my mom worked for, she got each one of us a little present for Christmas. And Mom had told her that I was named after Dad. His name was Joe Irwin Evans, and my name, she wanted me to name me Joe Irvina, and Dad wouldn't let her. She named me Joanne, but my first name is Joe. And so she told Miss Wilson that I was named after Dad, so she just assumed that I was a boy because I was named after my dad. And so for Christmas, she gave me a barber set, a real nice little barber, because she said, you know, you need to start learning a trade. And so I got a barber set, and so Dad was with us. Mama had, I don't know where Mama was, but Dad was with us. And he went out, and so I decided to cut the boy's hair. So I cut the boy's hair, and it went real well because I just shaved it and put some Vaseline on it and polished it up, and they looked good. And then the girls, I was going to put a bob, you know, just short on the side and in the back, but I couldn't get it even, so it kept going up and up. And then next thing I knew, they had, what do you call that thing?
A mohawk.
A mohawk. And I couldn't get it right, and then Dad walked in. And by the end, the girls was crying and acting crazy, and so he grabbed me up and gave me 2 licks, and it hurt my heart. It was like the worst whip, because it was from Dad. Dad didn't spank us. He didn't give us whipping. My dad had these big, pretty eyes, and all he had to do was just give you that look. And when he said no, it was no. So even when I was a teenager, I'd start off, if I wanted something, I'd start off saying, Dad, don't say no. Listen to the whole thing before you decide. And because if he ever said no, that was it. And but that was the only whipping I ever got from Dad, and it was their fault. They shouldn't have let me do it.
And your mother was the disciplinarian?
Always. She would, but she would, if you did something and she had to whip you, she would whip you, and then she hug you so tight you think she was gonna squeeze the air out of you, and talking about it hurt me more than it hurt you. And I'm like, I want to say, for real? It was something about my mom, even though she was just 4'11", nobody would have told my mom that she couldn't use the regular bathroom. Okay, you would think, this woman is missed being a midget by 2 inches, that people would not defer to her like that. But I'm telling you, my mom used the same bathroom everybody else did, except, okay, they had a bathroom in one house, and I think, and that's why the woman had a bathroom that was downstairs, was more like it was a closet.
That's right.
With a toilet, but it didn't have a sink for you to wash your hands. And she was new to the community, and the woman who had been in that house before her couldn't ever keep anybody. But when she came into town, Mama, I had just turned, I think I was about 15, and Mama told her that I would work, because it was summertime, that I would work for her during the summer. And the first time I went there, the first thing she told me was that bathroom was for me. And I was like, where do I wash my hands? She said, ask me for a towel, and I'll give you something to wash your hands with. But when I got there, she had washed a couple of loads of clothes and had them ready for me to hang out. She had another load on the line that I had to bring in. She wanted me to iron. I did her oven, defrosted her refrigerator, and vacuumed the whole house and dust. And finished the day. I was ironing, and she was told me she was getting ready to go play tennis, and she was gonna pay me before she left, in case the bus came for me before she got back. And she was talking about she was gonna give me $5. And I said, excuse me. I said, I've been here since 8 o'clock this morning. It's after 4 o'clock. And I think minimum wage then was like $1.25. And I said, you owe me more than this. And she said, well, that's all I'm paying you. That's all we pay for a day's work. I put the iron down. I said, I'm leaving. She said, well, we haven't fixed it. The bus doesn't come back through here till 5:30. You got to stay to 5:30 anyway. You might as well finish ironing. I said, no, I don't. And I walked from Old Irwin Park to downtown to catch a bus downtown. And it didn't even feel like a long walk because I was just that mad. I didn't even take the $5. And she said, well, you can't come back. And I said, you don't have to worry about me coming back. That made me understand that was not something I could do. It wasn't until the sit-ins happened, and he was all in favor of what the boys were doing. And our pastor, Bishop Wells, he was not in favor of it. He was from that school, same school that Dudley was from. James B. Dudley was from, the old time kind of the blacks who were Lincoln Republicans, that they felt like, you know, if we excel, if we show them that we deserve equal rights, and they'll come around, that they'll, you know, they thought those boys were stirring up some mess for no good reason. So he really didn't want our people in our church to participate.
What church was this that Bishop Wells was?
Wells Temple. It was Wells Temple at the time. It was Wells Temple until he passed away, and then it was named Wells Memorial. There were places where all the women who did day work would go and catch the bus to go out to the homes where they worked. And the buses would come back at 5:30 to pick them up, to bring them back home. But as far as buses running in the neighborhood to take you where you wanted to go, and Daddy wouldn't let us ride the bus. Just like I know he wouldn't let us go to the movies when they were segregated. We used to go Saturdays kind of frequently when it was the Palace Theater was there, that we would go to the Palace Theater as a family, because they used to have a lot of westerns, and my dad loved westerns, and he read all of the Zane Grey books and all of that. He loved westerns. I don't know what it was about him, but he said before, I found out lately he was right. He said a lot of colored boys were cowboys. And I was watching television the other night, and they had a special on, and they were talking about black cowboys and how much a lot of the after emancipation, a lot of the blacks, because that's what they had done in Africa, the herding and taking care of the cattle, they were really good at it. They went west to become cowboys. But anyway, we would go to the Palace Theaters frequently, but when they did, what do they call it, when they tear down black communities?
Urban renewal.
Urban renewal. Well, you know, they in Tulsa, they went in with guns and dynamite and blew up the black business area and the black home. They were more civilized about it in Greensboro and southern communities. They called it urban renewal, but the outcome was the same. It destroyed black neighborhoods, huge churches. Big Zion was one of the largest black churches in North Carolina. And they tore that, and all those huge churches that were in Warnersville community. They leveled it out. The first house that I can remember living in was on Cruz Street. It was a dirt road that ran parallel to the right side of Bennett College going down Gall Street. There was a sign there that said Cruz Street. There was a little store at the end of the dirt road, and right across from that there was the Red and White grocery store that was owned by some Jewish people. And my brother Philip worked there for years at the Red and White. When he was a teenager, he worked at the Red and White supermarket. But that's where our house on Cruz Street was. First we started out in a shotgun house near Aunt Daisy, because that's where my Aunt Daisy lived, on Cruz Street too at the time. she had a liquor house. You know, you could buy a couple of shots of liquor. I don't know if it was 25 cents or whatever.
Was it legal? Was this legal, or like White Lightning or something?
No, she didn't sell White Lightning. She sold good liquor. She sold good liquor.
This was after Prohibition.
That Daisy had a liquor house until she moved from Greensboro to Charlotte, and that's when they started cracking down on it, you know. But I was a teenager when she moved to Charlotte, so she prided herself on having good whiskey. Good whiskey. Second house was on Hackett Street. It's a little short street that runs right out into what used to be East Lee Street, and what do they call it now?
Gate City.
Gate City Boulevard, right there near NOCO Park. Matter of fact, we used to go to NOCO Park and Windsor Center all the time for games and stuff and to play. They used to have a tunnel. We couldn't cross. They used to be like a highway through Greensboro, so we couldn't cross the street, but they had a tunnel.
Apparently it's still there.
I think they closed it off, but it's still there. It's
Oh,
still there because they would have had to dig up the whole street to take it out, and people wouldn't have stood for that because it's a main artery going to the high school and most of the black community over there. So I don't think that they closed it off just like they did the tunnel that went to Dudley High School under
under 29?
It's not under 29. It's at the end of, I think that's Lincoln Street.
Okay.
There's a tunnel that used to, what road? Maybe it is under 29.
I didn't know there was a tunnel under
Oh yes,
over there.
it's on the other side of it was on the other side of where the football field is.
It must be 29 then.
Yeah, so we went to, yeah, it was because it was underneath when you came out of the tunnel, you were right at the back of the football field, over there near the visitor side of the football field. And so after Hackett Street, we moved up in the world. We moved to Morningside's home. And we love Morningside home because it was heat in every room. You didn't heat in the bathroom. You didn't have to wash up it with cold water.
Your other homes didn't have heat or running water?
Well, see, the house on Hackett Street, we had bunk beds and we were all in the same room. And my mama and Ben were in the other room because no matter where my mama lived, she had a living room. A lot of people would use one room, the other room, as a bedroom, but mama insisted on having a living room no matter where she was because she grew up poor. And her father was her family owned former funeral home. We moved in to Morningside home the summer before I started second grade. So that was around, we already had been, so it was like 56.
Do you remember anything of the polio period? Did your family have any issues with polio or?
No. There was a girl in our community who had to be in an iron lung. She lived in a house across the way from us when we lived on Hackett Street. That She had to be in an iron lung. I think she had polio or something. But we didn't. I don't know anything about it because I remember getting us getting our vaccinations for polio. That was one of the things that's changed. Now parents can opt out and decide they don't want to get their children vaccinated. That's one of the reasons why all those diseases are coming back. With all of these, if you wanted your child to go to public school, they had to be vaccinated. That was the bottom line. They didn't care what your religion was or who you were, or if you wanted them to go to that school with other people's children, they had to be vaccinated. There was no. I think we've lost the spirit of the common good. You know, some things we do, maybe it's not the best thing for us, but for individually, but for us as a people, we do things for the common good. We used to. Now everybody is so individualized. It's about me. It's about what I want. It's about what I need. It doesn't matter what's good for anybody else. You know.
Your grandmother
Grandma
Hester.
Hester was my mother's grandmother. I was set to stay with her when my birthday is November 3rd, and they used to have this rule that you could not start school until that year if your birthday was after October 16th. Used to be the cutoff date. So they wouldn't let me in the public school. So Mama put me, Grace Lutheran used to have a school. So Mama had enrolled me in Grace Lutheran. And I told her I wasn't going. And she said, we'll see, Missy. And so she had Gloria take me and drop me off at Grace Lutheran School. And the first day I said, okay, I'll try it. Miss Picnic, I think she whipped me about 3 or 4 times that day. As far as I could tell, it was for no apparent reason. What she was talking about, she was going to read us this book, The Three Bears. I told her, I can read that. Daddy used to read that, The Three Bears to us all the time. So she said, if you're lying, I'm going to whoop your little narrow behind. And I said, I can read it. So I was reading it, and at first she was nodding her head. And then when I got to the place where that hussy, Goldilocks, came up in their house, eating their food, and the Papa Bear said, what the hell is somebody doing up in our house? And that's when she grabbed me and took me to the cut room and spanked me for no apparent reason. Because I said exactly what Dad would say. And then it was another a little problem with something she was talking about. Was it Santa Claus or something? She was talking about being good for something, and I told her. She was talking about. I asked her a question about something she said, and she said I was being, what do you say, rude or disrespectful, and I said, no, ma'am, I was just asking you a question. And I said, my mama said if I don't know, I'm supposed to ask. And she took me out in the bathroom, and I said, well, I'm quitting. And I quit school the next day. Gloria took me to school, and I waited till she left. And then I followed her back to Washington Street School, because that's where I wanted to go anyway. And so I went to her and followed her back. And so she had a real sweet teacher, Miss Eldridge. Miss Eldridge let me stay, because I could color real good, and I was quiet, and I was nice, and I was respectful to her. And it wasn't until the principal came in about on the 5th or 6th day, and he was looking around the room, and he said, what is she doing here? He said, her mother pestered me all summer about letting her come, and she'd bring her with her and have some color she had paper she colored or something she'd written her name, talking about how smart she was. I know this child's not supposed to be here. And she said, well, she's really good and she's really smart. And she said, she can't stay. And so he made Gloria take me back to Grace Lutheran School. And so the next day I followed her back, and the day after that I followed her back. And then when she had to take me back to about the fourth time, she was just crying and carrying on and snotting about the mouth and nose and stuff. And so I was like, okay, Gloria, I won't follow you anymore. She said, oh, okay. So I didn't follow her anymore, but I wasn't going to stay at that school getting up 3 or 4 whippings a day. So I decided I was going to just skip. Because we walked through Bennett College to get to Washington Street School on the shortcut. So I said, I'm just going to go on and go to college. So I went to Bennett College. They had, I was walking through the campus, and I heard this noise. And I went to the little basement space where the noise was coming from, and there was some women playing with a big black ball, and they was rolling it down this lane. They were playing. I'd never seen adults play like that before. And so they thought I was cute and all that, so they were real nice. And so I went to Bennett for about, rest of September into October. I would go over to Bennett College, and the girls were really nice to me. Gloria had checked a couple of books out of the library, and I would take the book with me, and they'd read to me and all that kind of stuff. And I probably would have graduated from Bennett if it hadn't been for Hurricane Hazel. Hurricane Hazel came through, and they were saying, well, one girl ran in and talking about they making an announcement. A hurricane is coming, a big storm, and he's telling everybody to get to a safe place, And they said, well, we'll take you home. I said, no, you can't, don't take me home. I said, because the lady that keeps us, she brings her boyfriend in the house so after mama leaves for work, and they don't take me home. I can make it. And so I went running home, and it was raining. It seemed like the rain was coming from the sideways. And I was trying to get home, and the water was trying to wash me down. And the only thing that kept me out of the gutter was I had an umbrella that Aunt Daisy had given me. And I was screaming and holding on to the umbrella, and somebody grabbed me by the back of my raincoat and pulled me out, and it was a man that used to drive a taxi cab. And he pulled me out, and he said, where do you live? And he said he'd take me home, and I told him where I live. And so he took me home, and he just fussed the mama, talking about he and his wife had never been able to have children, and people like her who didn't even take care of their children and have 100 kids, and mama didn't say anything. She just said, thank you for saving my child. But when he left, she said, do you know how, she spanked me, and then she said, do you know how worried I've been? She said, I got to the school to get you, to bring you to safety, and they told me they hadn't seen you in weeks, and I didn't know where you were or what had happened to you. And I felt bad for her. I did. I almost made me cry. But then she hugged me and she said, don't ever do something like that again. And I didn't quit in the school anymore until 2nd grade.
So you went back to Grace Lutheran after that, or
no?
Okay.
No, she didn't. I didn't go to Grace Lutheran that year. They wouldn't take me back.
So you waited a year?
She sent me to stay with Grandma Hester, because she said Grandma Hester was the only person she knew mean as I was. and she straightened me out. So I went to stay with Grandma Hester, and till school started back the next year. And I had a good thing. She thought that she was a punishment, but really it turned out to be one of the best things that ever happened to me, because Grandma Hester was born in slavery. She was a slave. And so she had a whole lot of family history to tell, a whole lot of stuff to tell about the South, and why we had needed to be proud of who we were, and she even told, she was the first one to tell me about, what's the man's name, that Booker T. Washington. Booker T. Washington, that was the greatest man that she knew of at the time, with Booker T. Washington, that he was making sure black children were getting education, and not just education to the elementary level, but all the way through to college, and she told me that Negro, don't start saying colored, because we weren't colored, because even white people had color. We were Negroes, and I remember years later, when I was in high school, and I was down there for something, and I told Grandmama, I said, Grandmama, you told me that Negro was an African word, but it's not. It comes from German and French. And she said, who told you that? And I said, it was one of my teachers told me that. And he said, no. She said, well, you tell him I say he's a liar. And I said, well, and then Mama said, well, she didn't ever have any real formal education. Her brother taught all his siblings how to read, because he had the young man that he had waited on and everything, that he had been his valet, had gone to Europe, and he said he had paid more attention when he was learning than he did. So her brother could read and write, and he taught all his siblings. She was 9 when slavery ended, but she was a watchwoman, and she always was. And a matter of fact, and even when I was there, wealthy white women would bring their dresses and things to her, for her to do up, to iron. She could put that iron on that stove and get it hot. And I never saw her scorch anything or burn anything. I don't know how she did it, how she always had the right temperature for whatever she was taking care of. But her biggest season was when it was like cotillion season, and they had to do all those little white dresses for them to wear for those dances and cotillions and stuff. But that's what she did.
Was that a wood stove? A wood burning stove?
It was. She had a fire. She did all ironing outside during the summertime. Well, in South Carolina, it was, warm most of the year, so she did the ironing outside. And she had a fire, and then Uncle Boy had made her like a metal thing with like a plate with legs on it that went over the fire, and she'd sit the heavy iron, cast iron, sit it on top of that, and when it's hot enough, she'd iron with it. When it would cool off too much, she'd put it back on the fire. So I was already 6 when I went to Grandma to stay with Grandmama, but
And how did she use a washboard?
Yeah, she had a washboard. She didn't have a washing machine or anything. Matter of fact, the first washing machine that I can remember was my mama's. She had one of those wrinkled ones that
That you had to feed the clothes
you
through.
had to feed the clothes through. Mama had that one. And Grandma has to say it was just the young people today just lazy. They just lazy. They don't want to work. They don't want to work. Mama said you don't have to do more work than you have to do. You do what you need to do. And if somebody come up with an easier way to do it, and she told Grandmama, she said, Mama, and she called her Mama. She said, you know, Mama, that they didn't always have these washboards. She said, 'cause I heard somebody saying, and Bertha said, when y'all were younger, y'all had to beat the clothes on rocks near the creek. Y'all beat the clothes to get them clean on the rocks. And she said, she didn't do the wash. Bertha she was the baby, she just washed. But they did baby Bertha, her sister.
So she was enslaved by the James family?
Yeah.
Was there a plantation or someplace?
It was a plantation. Like I said, Grandmama lived in the plantation house. What happened was that when the son went to the war, to fight in the war.
The Civil War?
The Civil War. And the father died of a heart attack and a stroke. And the mother and the daughter went to live with the mother's family in Georgia. And they left the house for when the son came back. But he never came back. But Grandma Hester and her brother, the people, the slaves, they stayed there. One thing my grandmother made a point of, she said that even though there was some, it usually wasn't the owner who was hateful. If they hired someone who was just one step up from being, really poor himself, and just wanted to have somebody he felt like he was better than they were, and to beat them, and because she said most slave owners were not that hateful directly. She said, but the whole, and she called it an institution. That's the reason I say she was more educated than people thought she was. She said the whole institution was hateful. You didn't have to beat somebody's body to beat their soul. That's what she would say. You can beat somebody's soul just by owning them and telling them they are less than you and less than other people. And she said, in a way, that's a worse whipping than a body whipping, somebody beating you on your body when they beat your soul down and make it so you don't respect yourself. And that's one of the things she told me. She said, if nobody else respect you, you respect yourself. And believe in who you are and what you can be. And that's always more than other people think you can be, and in some cases more than they want you to be. So you be all that you can be.